Let's continue the conversation about fawning. Kissinda asks, I still wonder though, if you're in a situation that you didn't consent to, but someone begged, pressured, and you ended up fawning or trying to please them, does that make things consensual? I think the way that the question is asked is a little bit confusing. Essentially, I'll answer it based on what I think that you're trying to say. I think what you're trying to say is if you're in a situation with someone, you don't necessarily feel good about it. And I'll use a random example of like having sex, right? You and someone are talking about having sex. You're kind of in this situation where you're kind of open, you're vulnerable, and in the back of your mind, you don't really want to do it, but you're communicating with them, and your actions towards that other person are suggesting that you do want to do it. And so this is a two-part answer to this question. So I think outwardly, yes, you are consenting to that person. If your actions and your words are saying yes, people aren't necessarily a mind reader all of the time. Sometimes they can be, but not all of the time. But if your actions are saying yes, you're following through with things, then it's understood to be that you're saying yes and that you are actually consenting to that person, that yes, I want to do whatever it is that we're getting ready to do. I think what you're not consenting to, or who you're not consenting to, is yourself. And you're not consenting to yourself because you're not being authentic. With yourself, right? You're not being true to yourself. You're not, as the young folks say today, standing on business with yourself. What you're doing is what you think that somebody else wants you to do, even though in the back of your mind you don't necessarily want to do it. We all have different reasons for doing it. Again, it could be for fear of not being liked. It could be for fear that this person we fear that this person may get upset with us or things like that. So it can be a tricky situation. So I would say if it's a situation where a person is not necessarily abusive, but you guys aren't on the same page, like things are moving fast and they're just they're wanting to keep the pace of things moving fast. You want to slow down, but you haven't communicated that to them, then yes, you are consenting to that. But you're not consenting to yourself, and that's where the betrayal comes in, because you're going to definitely feel like you betrayed yourself. You're going to wake up with that regret. You're going to have that guilt and maybe shame feeling afterwards. You're going to be sort of panicking, maybe thinking that, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Gosh, why wasn't I sort of smarter about that? And it's because you weren't authentic to yourself. The authenticity would be like, no, I actually don't want to do that, and no, I'm not interested in pleasing someone else. So I think that's one scenario. There can be other scenarios where, I've worked with a lot of abuse victims over the years, where they're in an abusive relationship. And again, we'll bring up the example of sex again. And I think in an abusive relationship, for a lot of victims, sex becomes a survival mechanism. And so what I've heard a lot of women who've been in abusive relationships say to me is like, it's just easier to have sex with them, because if I don't have sex, things can get really nasty. He can become physically aggressive with me. He can become verbally aggressive with me. He can put me out of the house. He could do things towards the baby and those sort of things. And so in that situation where your safety can be threatened, where it's more like you're coerced into something, then that's a little bit different. So I want to make sure that I sort of put that specifier on that, because that is not consensual when you have a situation where it's like, it's either your safety or you have to do something that you don't want to do in order to survive in a house that's chaotic and or dangerous. So I hope that I'm clear about that. But in a situation where you're actively saying yes, there's no threat of safety, it's just more like you're you're being submissive, you're being a people pleaser, you're just wanting to go along for the sake of being liked, not wanting to rock the boat, you're wanting to keep the pace. That is consent with the other person and not with yourself. So remember, to kind of come out of fawning, one of the things that I recommend with people is to slow things down and start having more of an authentic dialogue with yourself about, like, okay, what is it that I feel, right? And not worrying about being chosen, not worrying about being liked, but what is it that I want in this very moment? What is it that would make me feel safe in this very moment? And so I hope that answers your question. Thanks for asking.